From the studios of Cue Ball Media in New York, this is the Create Your New Normal podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Quinones, and I will interview and share stories of people who have successfully reinvented themselves. They'll talk about the obstacles and challenges they faced and overcame to create their new normal. We'll look at what they did, how they did it, why they did it, and I know it will inspire you to get you from your A, where you are now, to your B, where you want to be. So are you ready to create your new normal? Well, let's get it. This is the Create Your New Normal podcast, episode number 3. And I'm excited to introduce to you my guest. My guest has been a disciple of Jesus for almost 37 years. He grew up in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the Chinatown area. He's the youngest of 5 children, but he also has 2 children of his own, 2 boys aged 25 and 28, and he has been recently remarried for almost 5 years. Professionally, he has worn many hats, and we'll talk about those in a minute. He's worked in the culinary arts for 20 years, in the ministry for 7, and has also worked in real estate and is now a civil servant. So I introduce to you my guest, Shawn Murray. What up, Shawn?
Hey, Anthony, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
All right, we're great. I appreciate you being on the show. We've known each other for almost 37 years. We've known each other almost from the beginning. I've seen you grow up in the church. You've done a lot of things. And I know I shared with our audience just, a little bit of your background. I know it may sound redundant, the question I'm going to ask you. But why don't you tell our audience about your journey to where you are today?
Wow. It's been a journey. It's been great. I think where I grew up is definitely a big part of, I guess, who I am. The youngest of 5, grew up raised by a single mom. Had a lot of fun in the city for a young man. City was like a playground, and definitely my love for sports and competition started there. And I played basketball. Just a normal childhood. But I think one of the challenges of being raised without a dad, my mom raised me. There's challenges that come along with that. And I say from early age, I got into stuff that, where my development years, I'm experimenting with drugs and doing other things. Sports, I think, probably saved me, because when I was playing sports and things of that nature, I was dabbling in it. But, I got to a point where I got sick and tired of the life that I was living, and I started to search for God. But those early years, again, sports, I love from an early age. I love working with young men. I had some great coaches in my life that I think shaped, how I see the game of basketball and even, I guess, life. I think 3 instrumental coaches, Mr. Marr, when I was like in elementary school, Luis Lopez from my neighborhood, and then Gil Reynolds, who they called the godfather of basketball, who he coached John Sally, myself when we were younger, Mel Davis, the killer. He was well respected, and just gave me the confidence that my game didn't have, as a young man, 13. So those 3 coaches were really instrumental. Mr. Mark gave me the fundamentals of basketball, and I try to teach it the same way that I learned it from them. So Louis taught me how to shoot a foul shot, and so those things were instrumental, and gave me the love for the game, and so that kind of saved me in a lot of ways. And there's a couple of young men that I was coaching as a young man, and I had a desire to want to coach, and I think that gave me the love for mentoring young men, which is something that I love to do and something that I did in the church and, in my life, even before I became a disciple. Um, so, that upbringing, growing up down there, getting into trouble, getting out of trouble. Um, and then I was in college and still getting into stuff. So I decided, I also started cooking in my teen years. And so I decided to drop out of college and pursue the culinary arts,
Mm-hmm.
which I did for 20 years total. Work with some really good chefs and was able to experience things. I did catering. We did catering on my own, and I even catered a luncheon for Imelda Marcos
Oh, wow.
through the church. It was so really some great life experiences, and those life experiences, those skills, I still use to today. Uh, so yeah, so again, me getting into trouble and that stuff, I started to search, and I was met and introduced to the church and studied the Bible, or I actually started pursuing God at 23, was searching, and then came at 27, became a disciple. And, that changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
From there, it's definitely been still a lot of, I went to the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Life's experiences, some of your best lessons.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Um, I mean, there's a lot
and so
there. Yeah.
and then where am I at today? I raised, as I said, two boys. You know, just being in their lives, raising them. Something I didn't have, and just trying to teach them to be men, and along the way, just trying to help other young men. you know, just what life's about, just by my lessons. And I guess that's what gave me the things that I talked about, gave me the love for working with teens. I guess not having a dad and just being in my boy's life and just seeing the need that so many young men have, knowing that I had deficiencies and it was coaches and men like that and other men in the church,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like Sam Powell, just seeing what a successful marriage is. And so it's been men, and just seeing how important role models are and mentors are. So it's something that I really love
Yeah.
to do. And it's exciting, but it's also very necessary in our world. I don't want to just say in our communities.
Oh, well, definitely. And I mean, you talked about how you really looked up to these men and just how, maybe not having a dad, you wanted to find some successful men, successful dad-like figures. And then you found them, which is a blessing. And then also appreciating that and then passing it and paying it forward to, young people that you come into your path. Let's talk a little bit about your conversion. Now, you did talk a little bit about, being wayward and getting into trouble, in and out of trouble, involvement with drugs. Why don't you share a little bit about your conversion and then what that meant for you going forward?
Okay. Well, at 23, I stopped using. I started searching, and I didn't go to any NA or AA meetings, but those principles, I wasn't hanging out with the same people, doing the same things. Um, I was working out, doing positive stuff, pursuing my career in culinary arts. So I wasn't doing that. And so one of my coworkers, she invited me probably 2 years later, about 25. And I was going to a church at the time, and I told her I thought she was, well, great. I hope she's serious, but I didn't go. And then 2 years later, this young lady at a restaurant that I was working at came into to the restaurant, and I mean, I was sick and tired of not just drugs, but I was tired of empty relationships. I was abstaining from relationships, but this young lady um, was the kind of young lady that I like. We built a friendship and told her I was interested in her, but she says right now she's studying the Bible. So I came out to church, start studying the Bible. A few weeks later, I mean, taught me things that I didn't know, showed me the Bible, taught me, and then I made an informed decision to follow Jesus, and that changed my life,
Mm-hmm.
gave me purpose, gave me direction, and so many other things. So Yeah, it shaped me into who I am today.
Yeah, that's the ultimate reinvention story, right? And this podcast is all about reinvention, changing lives, and there's nothing deeper, nothing more rewarding than giving your life to Christ. And it starts with that decision, but there are a lot of things that go on after that. And you talked a little bit about your life before becoming a Christian. Of one of the things that you really strive to do was to pour into younger people. And we did that together, in the teen
Yes,
ministry back
yes.
in the days. And then also, you've done work with, you know, like now you're doing work with the children, and you've always, whether you had an official title or not, you've always had your arm around teenagers and trying to pour into them. So that's one of the things that you've done, and I definitely want to hold you up for that. But that's not the only thing you do. Okay, you've been serving for over almost 37 years. And in that time, you've been active, I've been active, a lot of us are active. And so we wear a lot of different hats. Okay. Now, we could go on probably for about an hour about all the hats that you've worn. But why don't you share a little bit of our audience, some of the hats, some of the roles, some of the things that you have done in the church?
Okay. Well, early on, as a young new Christian, I was taught to serve and use my talent. So one of the things that I did, I assisted a Bible discussion, and they gave me a responsibility to take care of refreshments, something, and that's my wheelhouse. So I I enjoyed doing that. It taught me to have the heart to serve. So I've been in the back of kitchens where we've had events and
Yep.
Christmas, this, that. I've led Bible talks, worked with the teens, worked with the young teens at camp, worked in the children's ministry like the role that you do on a
Mm-hmm.
full-time basis, worked with mature older men in the daytime ministry in my 7 years. So um, just led by, like I said, led Bible discussions. Right now we lead a Bible discussion, me and my wife. So we have people over our house, we try to teach them the Bible and just serving any way we can. I've done weddings, I've done funerals, even being out of the ministry, I've continued to do funerals and serve people, and in that capacity. And so, I mean, I believe I've done so many things. People say, you did this, and I don't even remember because
Yeah.
it's just been a lot. But I'm grateful because it's I've learned so much. I've learned how to speak publicly, and because I was a shy kid from the Lower East Side, and getting up and speaking in front of. So there's so many things that I've learned just by serving and putting myself out there to help people. So one of the things that I really love to do, like it's kind of how I see the teen ministry. And uh, your first guest, what's his name, Angel, mentioned Mike Patterson, and Mike was he used to mentor me in the teen ministry. And so one of the things that I've looked at basketball as a ministry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so whether I inside the church, outside the church, I think it's such a natural way to mentor young men without them even realize they're being mentored.
Yeah.
It's a great way to build rapport. It's a great way to show them character, how to play the game, how to compete, what it means to be a real man, characters exposed. And so it's such a great tool even to today in my neighborhood. My sons were watching and they saw that,
Mm-hmm.
and my youngest son, Samuel, said that. He said, you were this in the neighborhood, and it wasn't anything it wasn't rocket science. It was just doing something that I do. And I recognize that this is such a great way. And I guess the impact that coaches had on me, at a young age, that I can have it with them. And it's nothing even just spending time building rapport and just showing them either by example and also, just helping them when you see their character, whether they quitting on the game
Yep.
or the positive and the good things. And that's one of my coaches, Gil Reynolds. He would coach you if you did something wrong, but if you did something good, he would stop the practice and show you,
Mm-hmm.
and not just you, but the whole gym.
Yeah.
We had the young guys, the college, high school guys, and the older guys. And so it's such a great tool that it's such an easy way to connect with young men.
Yeah, and it's important to stress the positive because sometimes we can just think about the negative, and we always, we do need to be corrected and mentored, but at the same time, when you're doing something well, you want to show that too. And it's funny you mentioned about you doing stuff and not even remembering. I like to prepare for my shows. I like to do research on my guests and things like that. And I totally forgot about the fact that you were a coach. Because you used to coach basketball, and that's one of the things that that I know that you did in the church. And so sometimes you can be around somebody for so long, and they do so many things that you forget. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So that's been a hat that you've worn very proudly. Some people in the church, I know, make money doing something, but they
Mhm.
serve in a way what they would rather do this full time. And some people have gone on to do things full time based on their service in the church because they really enjoy doing this thing, whether it be teaching kids, coaching kids, or ushering or speaking. I was the same way. I was very shy growing up too. So being in the church and small groups helped me to learn how to speak to where people feel like, oh, you were shy? It's like, yeah, I was. 25, 30 years ago I was, maybe not
Right.
now. But this is the area where that helped me to grow in that area. So I definitely want to go into that now, actually, because we do a lot of things. If you're active in a church, there are chances are you do a lot of things. So it could be simple things like teaching the kids, ushering, maybe preparing a message in front of the church. Maybe you're involved in AV, safety team. There are a lot of different areas in the church that we can be involved in, but we can look at it as, well, I do that. I help out with the kids. I usher. And we take these things for granted and we don't realize
Mm.
the impact that they have on people. Can you share a story maybe of where you did something and it was kind of like, whatever, but then you realize, later on that, wow, that had that simple thing or that thing that I just do, had a great impact.
I can think of a lot of stories, but I think of two things. One is this young man. I was in the Bronx ministry, and I went down there because one of the ministers was leaving, and there was a lot of single men down there. So I went down there with the intention of going to help.
Hmm.
And one young man asked me to mentor him. He's being mentored by somebody else, and a great young man. And we built a friendship. And I don't think it was anything spectacular that I did except spend time with him. I guess he even actually helped me when I was going through what I was going through as a separation. I was, not married.
Yeah.
And this young man has grown tremendously. He's married. Um, he's a, a lawyer now,
Hmm.
two kids, just a great young man, just in so many ways. And I just his friendship, and it was nothing special. I think of another situation where I was just spending time as a dad with my sons at the park, spending time. I think
Hmm.
that's probably the greatest thing, and um, that we can do is spend time with our family. I remember
Yeah.
watching a show. It was called the Rolanda Watts Show, and
Oh
the
yeah.
guest, the kids said, they say how kids spell love is Time.
Hmm.
Time. And so I was spending time with my son, and this young man walks into the park, and he sees us shooting around. His name is Martin. We come in, he shoots around, invite him to church. He studies the Bible. He's 17 years old. Uh, Introduce him to the other young men his age. He goes off to San Francisco. He's married, in the kids, serving in the ministry. And I did
Nice.
nothing but spend time with my son. And this young man has done great things. So I don't even so much things. I think what you're saying is think it's nothing, but it's us doing what we should do, and God brings the fruit. and I can't even take credit for those two situations.
Yeah.
And I'll share one more, the last one. I can remember coming out of ministry and going through a hard time, a transition, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so it was a really tough time for me spiritually, but I said, you know what? I need to give, I need to serve. And so I said, let me teach the third and fourth grades class, and they're very impressionable. And the teens and the young teens are a lot tougher. And I was not at a great place, I guess, spiritually, or, I was working through some stuff. And I can remember one of the kids teaching, and just, we're teaching the memory voice, and I'm doing this crazy voice, Julia Child voice, and all these crazy things, and teaching them the scripture, and it sticks with them. And years later, one of them shared how that impacted them. And I was like,
Wow.
I'm doing this for my heart and just giving back, and it also just helped them. So those are the three situations that I can think of, that just just being me and doing what I've loved to do and learned to do as a follower of Jesus.
Yeah. Those are great stories. And, again, you don't do it with the purpose of, I want to make an impact here. You just do it and it just does. I
Right.
remember a situation about 10 years ago, and we were ushering. And, ushering can be, one of those, we can look at it as a mundane task. It's like you pass stuff out, you tell people to sit down, etc. But it's a really important job because it's really the first line of defense, right? When you come into church, usually the ushers are the
Absolutely.
first people that you see. And this brother was getting us together, getting all the ushers together. I was ushering, he was getting them all together. And he says something to the effect, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was like, we need to smile, we need to be hospitable, we need to be welcoming. And he says that when I came to church for the first time, this brother greeted me. And when he greeted me, I knew I was in the right place.
Mm,
And he was me. And I was kind of embarrassed because it's like, oh, wow. And this was like 15 years later. Like he had been a part of the church for like 15, 20 years. Never mentioned that story to me. But yeah, you don't realize the impact that you have on people until years later. Because, like they say, they don't remember what you say, but they remember how you treat them.
right.
And that goes a long way. Definitely
True.
does. This is the Create Your New Normal podcast. Anthony Quinones is your host, and my friend, my buddy, my partner in the gospel, Shawn Murray, is my guest. And we work together in the children's ministry, so I guess we're spiritual colleagues as well.
Yeah.
You could put that on the resume. All right. So we talked a lot about church and the things that we do in church. But as we know, we spend church, about an hour and a half, 2 hours at church, listening to the message, singing, fellowshipping. But then we got to take it out there, right? So most of our life is outside of church. So there are things that we learn in church that help us outside. And there's some things that we do that can help us in terms of making a living. Like I shared about someone who, teaches the kids, and now they teach kids full time. A lot of it based on their service and loving what they did.
Hmm.
I look at your life, and it seems that a lot of the things that you've done in church has helped you outside of church professionally as well. I know you talked about serving refreshments at church and doing events, and that went in with your culinary skills. Um, what are some things that you have done as a disciple, as a Christian in the church, that have helped you outside of church? In the
Okay.
community, professionally, what are some things that they've helped you to do?
Well, I think who we are, it shouldn't be separate. Your life should not be separate. It's like who I am as a disciple, as a Christian, is who I am in my work.
Right.
From you know, I went into real estate after coming out of the ministry, trying to figure out what I want to do, and went into real estate. And I was you think, you're going to go in there and make a lot of money. But I was like, you hear all the things about the business world and real estate, and it's cutthroat and all that. And I was like, I operated with integrity. I'm like, I'm going to do business the right way,
Mm-hmm.
and not take shortcuts and stuff of that nature. And I've had conversation with colleagues, and it was like, oh, you can't be successful and be ethical. And I was like, no, that's not true. And I was with Century 21. I ended up going with Keller Williams, and they believe in doing business the right way, and so it aligned
Hmm.
with my beliefs. And so, yeah, I just believe it should be a win-win or no deal is one of the things that they talk about. So the principles
Right.
that how they built business was how I live my life. So it shouldn't be really a difference, you know.
Hmm.
Shouldn't compromise to make a deal, shouldn't
Right.
compromise your your integrity or your religion and what you believe to just to make a deal, um, I guess there's other things. So that's one thing in real estate. Just in right now, I work as a civil servant. I just serving people is it's the same thing. I'm not just I it's something simple. I can retire in 3 years, but it's something as simple as working for the USPS, all right? And
Hmm.
but all those skills of um, all my skills from in real estate, being a people person, um, not just what is it? Just building relationships in real estate and building relationships in the community where I work at. And I work in the area that I raised my kids, so I'm in the community. I'm the same person that I was, I believe, at church that I'm when I'm on the basketball court, when I'm working
Hmm.
in the current job that I do, and even when which was seems like a lifetime ago, 30 years ago, um, working in the culinary arts. It's
Yeah.
like it should be no different in your life.
Yeah.
And these skills translate into you can say being professional, or being like Jesus, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't think there's really much of a difference. I just try to be the same person that who I say I am,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that makes it a
Um,
lot easier when you're the same person, when you have to change and code switch, as they say, when you try to be something that you're
right.
not, that leads to a lot of problems. And it's something that people are looking for today. Like this job market is really bad. People are having a tough
Mm,
time finding work, but there's still a lot of people who are looking for the right job because they're not willing to compromise on their values. They want a job where there's not a whole lot of drama. They want a job where stuff lines up.
mm,
And what you were saying about not being a different person, not cutting corners, not being cutthroat. That's a great trait to have, and I think a lot of people are really looking towards that because there's so much toxicity in the work world, and it's just
true.
like I ain't got time to to be this person here and be this person at church and be this person in the community. It's like I want to be the same person, wherever I am. And so those are great things. You talked about transitioning, and sometimes it was a challenge, right? When you were in the ministry and coming out, that was a challenge. What are some of the challenges of transitioning, specifically in this transition from being in the ministry to now trying to find out what's next?
Mm. Well, I think the biggest thing was, okay, what am I going to do next? What's my skill set? And unfortunately, um, I mean, I had a lot of different skill sets, but they may not be recognized. Corporate America, they may not recognize. I love working with kids, but I was like, I would have to go back to school. I couldn't do that now because I had two young kids.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And being out of the culinary arts business to go back, it would, I could have done that, but you're starting at the bottom of the totem pole. And I guess what the most important thing was my kids, raising my boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so I chose real estate, which gave me the flexibility. It's pretty much starting your own business, doing real estate. Um, And then my ex-wife, she had a daycare, so I was around kids, and I was able to be in my kids' lives and raise
Mm-hmm.
them and be there for them. And the hardest thing was figuring out what I'm going to do, yet still being involved in my kids' lives. Um, and I think there's a lot to, I don't know, there's a lot of misconception. Sometimes people put career and stuff ahead of the response. The greatest job we can ever do is raise our kids
Yeah.
and be in our kids' lives. So my decision was based on that,
Mm-hmm.
how I can do that. And so that was still a challenge, a transition. Um, but I have no regrets.
Mm-hmm.
I have no regrets for making that choice to put my kids' life and being able to be in their lives.
Yeah, and you got to have your your list, I guess, so to speak, your priorities,
Priorities.
and sometimes it's tough to make those choices, but there's nothing better than feeling good about your choice, not compromising on your children, not compromising on your wife, your values.
Absolutely.
It's not always a great feeling in the beginning sometimes because you look at what you're getting for what you're giving, but in the long run, you realize, okay, this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to stand on it, regardless of what happens. Because if you're a Christian, you know that God's got you, so that gives you a lot of confidence. So you were out of the ministry, you went into real estate, you've been a chef, and now you're a civil servant. Now, most civil servants that I know kind of start young and then they retire, 55, 60. Um, but you kind of came in the middle or the later end. Like most people don't become civil servants at your age. Now, we're not going to put your age out
Correct.
there for everybody to
I have
know.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, well, you do it. I won't do it. You do it.
I'm 64.
Okay.
So
But when did you start at USPS, the
so it'll
United
be
Postal
9 years
Service?
ago. So I was in my 50s.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Now,
50. Yeah, around 55, 56.
so you would be old, right? The average person, like I don't know who you interviewed with, but that person across from you probably would have thought of you as an old person. Like, why would you want to start now? This is when I'm looking to retire at 55.
Correct.
So how are you able to get into the civil service at that age? Because
Well,
that's not a normal story.
I was looking because that was probably the easiest transition for me to do as far as where my kids were at. And actually, that wasn't my plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my plan wasn't to do civil service, but um, it was a decision based on, okay, me and my ex-wife, we broke up. So that was, I need to do it. I need to switch gears and do a career. And so that was probably the easiest and the quickest way, and landed, worked for MTA for a while, and then ended up at the USPS. So it wasn't my plan. So you're right. It's a little unconventional, and it's been 9 years. And if I do 3 more years, um, then I will use my skills. Retirement for me doesn't mean I'm not going to be working. I'll be able to do things that I love. Be able to use my real estate background, and other things I would like to do. My dream job would be coaching, because
Uh-huh.
I would just love to coach and influence young men. That would be, and whether I get paid to do that or not, but that's something that I always say that I would like to do. And working a 9 to 5 doesn't give you the time to do those things,
Mm-hmm.
to the capacity that I would like to do.
Yeah. All right, great. So you are like a Renaissance man. You have reinvented yourself a couple of times. Going from the world to becoming a Christian to being in the ministry to working as a chef, real estate, civil service, MTA, USPS, all these different things. Now, as we know, this show is about personal reinvention, and I've interviewed a couple of guests so far. My first guest uh, was a model who worked in TV production, then he went into the ministry, Now he is an activist. My second guest, worked in sports. He still works in sports. He's a storyteller. He was an executive producer. Now he's a director of a sports museum. And in both of those, he tells stories, about the game and about, now he's talking about rings and uniforms and artifacts, telling the story about that. Looking at your life, okay, looking at it, the thread from here to there, to where you are now, what would you say is the thing that has given you the ability to reinvent yourself multiple times?
Wow. Good question. Um, wow. Um, I, I'd have to say, I mean, I'll give you the religious answer. It's God.
Okay.
It's the decision that I made to make him Lord, and to, just to live a life. It's my relationship with God and the example that I see in the scriptures. There's many examples.
Oops, we lost you there for a
I'd
minute.
probably say one of the hardest things I've been through was, you see me go through it, go through a separation and a divorce. That was probably the hardest thing. And coming through that was 2014. And coming through that, now I've been married 5 years. Um, but it was the hardest thing, one of the hardest things I've done. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but it taught me some great lessons. It taught me some lessons that I probably never would have learned if I didn't go through that, where it's changed my character. It's helped me to grow. It's helped me to empathize and see people that I might not have seen before in all the different hats and the capacities that I've worked. You know, when I've done funerals, I've empathized because I can relate losing family members myself, and doing funerals so I can empathize with them. But going through that, I can see people, and when you're God says he hates divorce, and there's reasons why. He doesn't tell us why, but when it's not just you going through it, it's your kids going through it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like I said, it's like uh, it's trauma, but someone died, but they're still alive, and so you're mourning, you go through grieving, you go
Yeah.
through all that, and so that experience has taught me so much. In so many ways, and it also shaped and changed my character probably in the 20 something years before, more so in the 20 something years before then. And so just holding on to the scriptures through that time, there was times I felt weak. I
Mm-hmm.
felt, but as the scriptures say, when you're weak you can be made strong. I just held on to God's word and reasoned. I reasoned that, okay, it says God disciplines those he loves, right? And
Mm-hmm.
consider hardships as discipline, and that God is loving me through this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I held on to the scripture. So what helped change me was, it's God's word, and it's like we're taking it and it's being put into practice. I'm applying it to my life in the most challenging times.
Mm-hmm.
I had one brother said to me, I was driving, giving him a ride home, and he said, "Can I ask you a question?" He says, "You make this look easy." It was the most difficult thing that I was going through, but I just held on to the scriptures and held on to God. Um, you know, so many stigmas in the community. I went to therapy. You know, to get help and to work on me, but it was just God was working on me, and then I had to do the work to work on myself in these areas. It wasn't like it was, the therapist fixed me. When I came back, they said, "Oh, you did good work this week." I was looking at my life and taking responsibility. What did I do wrong? What do I need to do differently? And what is God teaching me? So, um, you know, that it was the answer. That's the answer that I have. I don't think there's a short answer, but it taught me so much.
Okay. All right. Now, speaking of God's word, okay, you talked a lot about empathy, just going through a divorce and then, um, you know, understanding what people are going through when they have a loss of a family member or maybe a divorce themselves. What else about God's word would you say has given you the ability to reinvent yourself? Because, you know, I know from experience, I wasn't in the ministry, but coming out of the ministry is a tough thing sometimes because, for example, when you get fired from a job or you leave a job, okay, I'm not saying you got fired, but let's say that you don't have
That's
the
what
job.
happened.
Okay, well, that's what happened. But let's just say you don't have the job anymore, right?
Right,
Generally,
right,
you are not at that place. But a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times when you're out of the ministry, it's like, okay, you leave that job, but you're still a Christian. So it's not like
right.
you've been fired from that job. You are
No.
still there. And so dealing with things like that can be tough when you're still in the same place. And then also just, in terms of trying to figure out what to do next. And then moving on to these different, like civil service at an advanced age. Like these things are not normal. Now, obviously, we can always, give it to God because God is ultimately the one who is responsible for that. But there are things that he does for us. There are things that he teaches us. There are things that he draws out of us. So empathy is one thing. What are some other things where you say that God has given you the ability to reinvent yourself with?
You mentioned the word, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, um, I think about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. Um, so God's word has helped me to see things differently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we live in a world that, they're looking for answers, and God's word gives me wisdom. It helps me to see things. It helps me to see people. Um, okay, okay, marriage. it gives you, it gives you
Yeah.
wisdom, on just how to be a husband. It equips us for every good at work. I never saw my dad. It taught me how to be a good father. It teaches you how to be a good husband. It teaches you how to be a good son. It teaches you so many things, which um, the answers are right there in the word, and it's just a matter of us applying them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a matter of just listening to it, but putting it into practice. That's where what makes the difference. And as long as I continue to do that and strive to do that, I will continue to transform. I will continue to change. I feel like God's not done with me, you know.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
so it's just stories in the Bible. When I was going through that most challenging time, I wasn't studying out Job, but I thought about Job, and he says, just in my one of my prayers, I said, God, bless my life the way you bless the latter, like Job's life.
mm-hmm.
And I feel like God has blessed my life. If I don't get anything else from this point on, God has blessed me. I've seen so much, but I don't feel like I'm finished,
That's
or
right.
He's finished with me.
Right.
You know, um, I think it's a lot of it's your mindset, a lot of it how you see it. If you can apply the scriptures, people would say about the civil service job, and oh, this must be a tough job. No, I mean I was in customer service and customer relationships. That's really it. And people say, "Oh, it's a tough job," and I said,
Mm-hmm.
"No, because I'm walking every day, but it keeps me. I want to be active, and it keeps me in shape." I said, "No, they pay me to get in shape." So I've probably lost I don't know, I'm down to weight that I was when I was a teenager
How
by
about
just being
that?
active. So it's all about how you see things. If you look at the negative, you're gonna see all the negative. But I see it as a blessing, even though it's not something I planned, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, and God's word transforms us from the inside out. And I know that He has done
Mm.
that for you, and He's done that for me. And like you said, He's not done with us yet. So there's going to be a lot more transformation for the good, because you can transform for the bad, but we don't do that. We're going to transform ourselves for the good. We're going to keep pressing. We're going to stay positive, and we're going to transform into other things later on. Who knows? But I know whatever you do, Shawn, it's going to be successful. You've been a great example for a long time. And I think relationships also is a big thing. I think, you're a very easygoing guy. You get along well with people. I mean, some people, like you said, they said that you made this look easy. We know it's hard, but having a positive outlook and also building great friendships, I know that's helped you along the way as well. So keep up the good work. Appreciate you being a guest on Create Your New Normal, and pray for you, and also pray for our Knicks. I got my lucky sweater today. So
Wow.
by the time this airs, God willing, we will be Eastern Conference champs, and we will
I
go
hope
on
so.
to even bigger and better things. But seriously, thank you for being a guest, and thank you for being who you are, and thank you again for being a guest on Create Your New Normal.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me on. Really proud of this show and honored to be your third guest.
All right,
Keep up the good work.
all right, I appreciate it. That is Shawn Murray. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Create Your New Normal. And don't just listen. Like, share, subscribe, rate, and review this show at Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. And for more information on how you can create your new normal, visit createyournewnormal.com to learn how to reinvent yourself on your terms, not someone else's. That's createyournewnormal.com. Well, that's all for now. And until next time, I'm your host, Anthony Quinones, inspiring you to create your new normal. Take care, and God bless.